Britain in the 1950s still smelled of coal smoke and wet pavement. Cities scarred by war were rebuilding brick by brick, and for millions of ordinary families, a motor car represented something almost magical: freedom, stability, progress. On narrow suburban streets, polished chrome glimmered beneath weak winter sunlight. Fathers washed their cars on Sunday mornings with quiet pride. Mothers packed suitcases for long journeys to the seaside. Children pressed their faces against cold windows as Britain slowly moved forward. And some cars became far more than transport. They became memories. So before we step back into that lost world of smoky factories, rainy high streets, and fading chrome, take a moment to subscribe and join us on these journeys through Britain's forgotten motoring past. Today, many of these cars are gone from the roads entirely, surviving only in faded family photographs and the minds of those who once loved them. Yet, despite the decades, these machines still stir something emotional deep within Britain itself. These are 10 British cars from the 1950s that Brits miss more than anything.
At number 10 was the humble but determined Morris Minor. When it arrived in 1948 under the guidance of Alec Isagonis, the Minor looked modern without feeling intimidating. Rounded headlights, cheerful styling, and a compact shape made it instantly approachable for working families climbing slowly into the middle class. Its tiny 803cc engine was hardly powerful, producing just over 30 horsepower, but power was never the point. The Minor represented independence at a time when many families had never owned a car before. For countless Britons, this was the first vehicle that carried them beyond their own neighborhoods. Holiday camps in Cornwall suddenly felt reachable. Grandparents could be visited without train timetables dictating the day. The Minor felt honest. Simple controls, light steering, a cabin that somehow felt warm even during miserable February mornings. And because it was affordable to repair, owners became emotionally attached to them in a way modern motorists rarely experience now. Rust eventually consumed many examples, especially around the sills and floor pans, but even then, families struggled to let them go, because the Minor had become part of the household itself. But if the Minor symbolized modest British optimism, the next car represented something far more ambitious.
At number 9, the Jaguar XK140 brought glamour back to Britain. Long before motorways carved across the countryside, the XK140 thundered along narrow A roads with an elegance few countries could match. Beneath its sweeping bonnet sat Jaguar's famous 3.4-liter straight-six engine, producing nearly 190 horsepower in some versions. To post-war Britain, it looked almost exotic. Aircraft-inspired curves, rich leather interiors, walnut dashboards polished like expensive furniture. For businessmen rebuilding their lives after wartime austerity, owning a Jaguar meant you had finally arrived somewhere important. Yet what owners remember most was not the speed. It was the feeling. Driving through rainy evening streets while reflections danced across the bonnet. Pulling outside theaters or hotels while strangers stopped to stare. The XK140 gave ordinary British roads a touch of Monte Carlo sophistication. Of course, these cars were not perfect. Electrical faults became common companions. Oil leaks were practically expected. But owners forgave them because the experience felt emotional rather than mechanical. And Britain would soon produce a car even more deeply tied to ordinary family life.
At number 8, the Austin A30 arrived during a decade when Britain desperately needed practicality. Small, affordable, and surprisingly cheerful, the A30 became a familiar sight in terraced streets and newly built housing estates. Its tiny 803cc A-Series engine offered modest performance, but fuel economy mattered far more in a country still recovering financially.
This was the car of grocery runs, school journeys, and rainy commutes to factories. The seats were cramped, the cabin noisy. Heating was almost optimistic. Yet families adored them because they represented progress within reach. For many women, the A30 also became one of the first cars they regularly drove themselves, quietly changing social life across Britain. And perhaps that is why people still remember them with affection. The A30 was never glamorous, but it was dependable companionship during years when life itself often felt uncertain. But the next car brought something Britain had rarely seen before: true elegance.
At number 7, the Rover P4 looked like it belonged outside government buildings and country estates. Nicknamed Auntie Rover for its dignified appearance, the P4 carried an air of restrained British confidence. Smooth lines, leather upholstery, and wood-trimmed interiors gave owners a feeling of quiet prestige without the flashiness of American cars arriving overseas. Underneath, engines ranged from modest 4-cylinders to smoother 6-cylinder units capable of relaxed high-speed touring. But what truly defined the P4 was comfort. Owners spoke about the softness of the seats, the calmness of long drives through foggy countryside roads, the reassuring weight of the steering wheel. It felt built for adults. In an increasingly fast-moving world, the Rover represented patience and dignity. And perhaps that is why people miss them now. Modern cars often feel disposable. The P4 felt permanent. Still, the next car brought Britain something entirely different: youth. At number 6, the MGA transformed the image of British sports cars forever. When it debuted in 1955, the MGA looked impossibly sleek compared to the upright designs that came before it. Its low bodywork and flowing curves felt modern, almost rebellious. Young couples loved them. American tourists adored them, and British servicemen returning from abroad dreamed of owning one. Powered initially by a 1.5-liter engine producing around 68 horsepower, the MGA was not brutally fast, but it felt alive. Open-top motoring along coastal roads became part of its identity. Of course, these cars demanded patience. Rain leaked through soft tops, gearboxes could feel stubborn, winter driving required courage. But none of that mattered when the sun appeared over the countryside and the road opened ahead. For many owners, the MGA represented youth itself, and what came next would become even more deeply woven into British identity. At number 5, the Ford Anglia 100E arrived quietly, but it quickly became part of everyday life across the nation. Its small 4-cylinder engine was economical rather than exciting, but that suited Britain perfectly. The Anglia became a working companion. Builders drove them. Teachers relied on them. Young couples squeezed children and luggage into impossibly small spaces for summer holidays. The seats smelled faintly of damp wool in winter. The windows fogged constantly. Yet the car felt trustworthy. And that mattered enormously during a decade when reliability could determine whether a family reached work, school, or home at all. Many were eventually scrapped after rust devoured their arches and chassis. But losing them felt strangely personal, because cars like the Anglia witnessed ordinary British life at its most authentic. Still, the next machine carried far more prestige. At number 4, the Triumph TR3 was loud, fast, and unapologetically physical. Its 2.0-liter engine produced thrilling performance for the era, while sharp handling turned winding British roads into playgrounds. Unlike softer saloons of the decade, the TR3 demanded effort. Heavy steering, firm suspension, a cabin exposed to wind and weather. But that rawness became its charm. Drivers felt connected to the machine in a way modern motoring rarely allows. Every vibration, every gear change, every bend in the road felt immediate. And despite the discomfort, owners adored them, because the TR3 made even ordinary journeys feel adventurous. Yet the car at number 3 captured something even more emotional.
The Austin Healey 100 looked like speed itself. Long bonnet, low stance, exhaust note echoing across quiet countryside villages. Created through a partnership between Austin and Donald Healey, the car became one of Britain's great automotive exports. Its 2.6-liter engine delivered strong performance, but it was the styling that truly captivated buyers. It looked cinematic. For returning RAF pilots and ambitious young professionals, the Austin Healey offered excitement during years still haunted by wartime memories. Driving one felt optimistic, hopeful, alive. But ownership was rarely easy. Interiors grew unbearably hot, weather protection was minimal, mechanical quirks constantly demanded attention. Still, owners forgave everything because no other British car of the era felt quite so romantic. And then came a machine many believed represented the future itself.
At number 2, the standard Vanguard. The Vanguard symbolized post-war modernity. Wider bodywork, spacious interiors, and bold American-inspired styling made older British cars suddenly feel outdated. Families saw possibility in them. Long-distance travel became easier. Comfort improved dramatically. The car felt designed for a changing society that no longer wanted to merely survive, but to enjoy life again. Taxi drivers trusted them. Businessmen relied on them. Entire families crossed Britain inside them during smoky summer heat waves. Yet, perhaps what people miss most is how optimistic they felt. The Vanguard belonged to a Britain trying to reinvent itself. But no car from the 1950s captures British nostalgia more completely than number 1, the Jaguar Mark II. Even today, it still looks magnificent. Introduced at the end of the decade, the Mark II combined luxury and performance with extraordinary confidence. Available with powerful straight-six engines up to 3.8 liters, it could outrun many sports cars while carrying 5 adults in complete comfort. Leather seats, deep wood veneers, chrome shining beneath streetlights. The Mark II felt sophisticated without losing aggression. Doctors bought them. Racing drivers adored them. Criminals famously used them for high-speed escapes across Britain's growing motorway network. But beyond the headlines, ordinary owners remember something quieter: the atmosphere. Driving home late at night while rain tapped softly against the windscreen. Watching illuminated gauges glow amber in the darkness. Feeling for a moment that Britain still made the finest cars in the world. And perhaps that is why these machines continue to matter. They were never just collections of steel and glass. They carried families through difficult decades. They witnessed courtships, arguments, seaside holidays, and final journeys home. They reflected a Britain rebuilding itself after devastation, searching for pride and identity once again. Many are gone now, scrapped, rusted away, forgotten by history. But for those who remember them, these cars still live somewhere far beyond garages and museums. They live in memory. And perhaps that is the most powerful engine of all. If one of these cars brought back memories for you, or reminded you of someone you once knew, share your story below. And if you enjoy exploring Britain's forgotten motoring past, subscribe for more journeys into the machines that shaped an entire nation. Because the next chapter of British motoring history is even more extraordinary.